Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Game. So today we're going to have a fun and interesting video for you guys today, because we're going to be talking about MAME arcade emulation, how it's going to be changing moving forward. Because yesterday the MAME team put out an update on the website talking about some of the changes that are going to be coming to MAME, how the release schedule is going to be working going forward, what operating systems are going to be functioning, and how they're going to be changing a lot of the code base to modernize this thing. Because the reality of the situation is MAME got its start in 1997, and now it is 2026. That is basically almost 30 years at this point in time. So obviously it definitely needs a few updates around the edges to get to more modern PC requirements. And that's not to say MAME isn't doing an incredible job. There just is a ton of legacy code in there and legacy builds that probably aren't really being used by anyone whatsoever. So we're going to be going over all of the changes that are coming to MAME and what that's going to mean for you as far as actually getting updates to your arcade emulation. Before we get too far involved though, do me a huge favor down below, hit like and subscribe and ring that notification bell, definitely helps us out. If you feel so inclined and want to support the channel, we got a Patreon link down below as well. But for as long as I've been talking about retro gaming on this channel, I've been saying just how incredible a project MAME is. It really keeps the arcade dream alive for 99.99% of people out there, because even people like me who love to collect original arcade hardware and have an epic crap ton of it, I still don't have like 99% of the games that MAME can actually run, and nobody out there really does. And if it wasn't for MAME, so many of these games would absolutely be lost to time, because something like California Speed, sure, you could probably find an arcade cabinet out there somewhere, but there's thousands upon thousands of games in MAME that if you actually saw an arcade cabinet for, you'd basically be finding a unicorn and Bigfoot in the wild, hanging out and having a high life together. What I'm trying to say is MAME really does keep all of arcade history alive, and the preservation is absolutely epic. Now going through this update again as of yesterday when I record this, but it'll probably be a few days until you actually watch it. They did make an April Fool's announcement, which is kind of fun, but this one obviously is a very legitimate release as far as the information is concerned. And the number one thing we're going to talk about off the top is the fact that MAME is not going to be releasing a new update in April. They're going to go to a reduced frequency schedule of releases. I don't know if that means forever and we're going to be going bi-monthly, or maybe even skipping 3 months, you never know. But when I joke around for the fact that no one will be alive to see a 1.0 MAME release, this pushes it even further out into the future, because it's no longer 713 months till MAME is complete. And in the most recent update video, I talked about just how good MAME was doing and how it was fixing very small bugs in a lot of games that have existed for a very long time. But I'm sure MAME doesn't really need to worry about a monthly release schedule, because it absolutely runs so many games so incredibly well. So it may actually be one of those things. Maybe a 2-month release schedule will be better, because now when they're trying to increase the performance of platforms that are on MAME but don't work 100% correctly, or trying to add games or platforms that don't work whatsoever, it may take more time than a month, and it may actually allow for a little bit more fun to come down the pipeline. Because there are a ton of games in MAME that obviously work near perfect to all the way perfect, but there's definitely a good amount of games in MAME right now that don't work whatsoever, or don't run in a way that would actually be considered fun to play. I don't think that is a knock on MAME emulation. I love each and every bit of it, but especially when you get to some other later 3D hardware, that type of stuff that might take 3 or 4 months to even get an improvement on the board. Because don't forget, it's not like anyone's running MAME full time, and it's not like anyone's getting a full-time salary to do this stuff. It is a hobby, it is a passion project, and a lot of times you don't really have the infinite amount of time you wish you did to dedicate to your hobbies. Because this channel definitely takes a lot of my spare time up, but trust me, it's one of those things, if I could do more, I absolutely would. And I'm sure that's something that the MAME team definitely doesn't maybe struggle with, but has to think about in the background. How much time is it going to take to do something, and how much time do I actually have to do it? And moving over into some of the more technical stuff, including what operating systems MAME is and isn't going to work on in the future, they're switching over the compiler in C standard library to C++20. And again, because MAME is so incredibly old, having its first release in 1997, I'm sure there's a lot of legacy stuff in there that probably really isn't useful anymore. But one thing that is happening is every operating system below Windows 10 is no longer going to be supported by MAME, at least mainstream MAME. Maybe you'll see some sort of fork to make sure it keeps working, but as far as the official build, you're going to be Windows 10 and up. And that kind of makes sense. I can't imagine a ton of people below Windows 10, but it might bum a few people out. Additionally, there's going to be some changes to the debugger, and that is something that can actually be very useful in certain environments, not just for developers trying to make emulation work, but also for hardware preservationists like myself who actually repair hardware when it can get very tricky. You can step through the debugger and try to actually break the emulation to get it to spit error codes out that you would see on real hardware. And when you understand how you've broken something in MAME emulation with a debugger, then it gives you a little bit of a hint as to what you should look at when it actually comes to repairing the hardware. Now this is a Konami Cobra board. I'm going to be taking another run at fixing this soon. I'm talking to somebody else on the Arcade Projects forum that has another broken board, and playing around in the debugger with the help of Electron Ash, somebody from the Mr. FPGA side of things. He was able to actually see that a little bit of the error code reporting was coming through in the post, and you could kind of get some semblance of an idea as to what the error meant, because my board has an E1 error, which is the most common one with the Cobra hardware. So basically trying to break MAME emulation and are using the debugger to understand what is being stepped through and where you should look is a very useful thing. So a better debugger would absolutely be amazing. And again, MAME is so useful for so many things outside of arcade emulation. It's why I love the project so much, because when you need to actually verify whether or not any sort of chip on your system is good or bad, something that has been dumped by MAME, you can go ahead and grab good known dumps, check them against the actual chips in your board, and if you get a 1-to-1 checksum match, you know that that chip is perfectly fine. It eliminates a lot of the overhead when you're actually trying to repair stuff, and that is massive, so a new debugger going to be a big deal. You'll also see that 32-bit x68 recompiler backend is being removed, and that makes sense again, because we've been at 64-bit CPUs for the longest time now. And then there's just some funny stuff which I could assume nobody out there uses, but I'm sure someone in the comments will tell me otherwise. But OpenSolaris and other System V Unix systems are no longer going to be supported by MAME, as are PowerPC and OpenPower, which is basically what PowerPC became. And again, this makes perfect sense, because I can't imagine many people out there using an OpenPower CPU right now to run MAME. It's one of those things. PowerPC does still exist, but it doesn't really get used in anything that would be user-facing, so I don't know why MAME would ever have to run on that. And an obsolete audio tool for macOS, which has been replaced with something new. So I got a lot of comments of people feeling concerned that MAME wasn't going to keep continuing in the way that you would expect. And trust me, that isn't the case whatsoever. The things that are being removed are stuff that you never touch in any way, shape, or form. And as far as going to Windows 10 only, there's only so far you can push an operating system before you have to stop supporting it. And trust me, that's coming from someone who is still on Windows 10 and is absolutely trying to stay away from Windows 11 as much as I possibly can in my workflow. I cannot stand how it works, and it just drives me insane compared to Windows 10, which I have running well. But the fact that you're not going to get legacy Windows in the most recent version of MAME that's coming up in a few months, it might bum a few people out, but I totally understand why the MAME team feels that this is necessary. And honestly, everyone should trust the MAME team. They know exactly what it is that they need to do to keep working on this moving forward more efficiently to bring us all more fun. And switching over the C++ standard is going to give them new functionality, and you're going to see probably better things come from exactly that. Because like the last 18-24 months, MAME has definitely had a lot of improvements on some hardware out there that is exceedingly rare, and I've been telling people for the longest time has hidden gems. Like Hyper Neo Geo 64, for the longest time you could not sit down and play Bariki 1 because it had layer priority issues in the Z buffer, and you'd basically have graphics on top of where they needed to be and you couldn't see your fighters. That's obviously completely fixed up. Or stuff like the Namco System 23, that's been seeing a lot of improvements in the back end of 2025 and now the beginning of 2026. Even if we already are in April, it's still the first third of the year, and I'm sure a lot more of that fun is going to be coming. So having a better toolset and a more modern toolset moving forward for MAME will just end up with a lot of people probably having more fun stuff to actually check out. Now, I did leave a link to the description below to this entire actual text page, so if you want to go in and deal with all the nitty-gritty, you can definitely do that. But basically what you need to know is MAME is changing how it's working, it's trying to modernize itself at the same time going to a different release schedule. Because if this thing came out in 1997, you know full well it's definitely probably due for another update as how it works moving forward. What I really hope to see at some point in time is some of the other hardware in that 3D era that either doesn't work well enough to play or doesn't work at all become playable in MAME one day. Now, I don't expect that to happen anytime soon. Maybe it never will. My expectations are always zero and I'm happy with what I get. But something like the Konami Viper has a ton of amazing games. What you're seeing right now is real Viper hardware running in my capture setup, and even I can't play Warzade because it's a 24 kHz or medium resolution game, and I have a 15 kHz and 31 kHz monitor. So my light guns do not work on this whatsoever. There's a ton of other fun Viper stuff out there that I wish people could play. Well, leave me a comment down below and you tell me, if you could snap your fingers and make one game playable in MAME that does not work whatsoever, which one would it be? I would be really curious about that. But honestly, this makes sense for MAME. There are a lot of updates coming, I'm sure, but maybe going to a bi-monthly release schedule, at least for the interim, would be fun. And nothing about the statement says it's going to be permanent. They just saying they're changing their release schedule, and they will be skipping April. So don't expect a MAME 288 is out video for me, because there isn't going to be a MAME 288 until the end of May, it seems like. Be sure to that if you have any questions or comments, leave them down below. But we're done. I'll see you guys next time. Hope you enjoyed the video. Bye-bye.